in the south in places like Dallas and Arkansas. Dallas is a city, Arkansas is a state, Vancouver, British Columbia. That's what we're going to talk about, because it is definitely more dangerous to drive in the south when they get snow than it is to drive in places like Duluth, Minnesota that gets sub-zero temperatures. So we're going to give you some information about that and how to keep yourself safe and drive on these treacherous roadways. Marion is here. Eric is here. Hello. Hello. If you have any questions, tell us where you're tuning in from, what class license you're going for, how we can help you out. We'll definitely help you out with all your questions about passing a driver's test, becoming a safer, smarter driver, or starting a career as a truck or bus driver. We can definitely help you with all that. Miles, hello, my friend, and Elevator Fan tuning in from Monticello, Indiana. Hello, my friend. How are you? And lots going on. And one of the reasons, the reason that I was doing this live stream, this particular topic, is because I was on LinkedIn. I was looking at some of the posts on LinkedIn, and one of the posts was actually talking about this very topic, about why it's more treacherous, why it's more dangerous to drive on the roadways in the south as opposed to driving in Minnesota or driving in Michigan or Northern Ohio. And they missed the main point. They completely missed the main reason. They said things like they don't have sand trucks, they don't have plow trucks, they get lots of ice. They never explained why they get lots of ice. They just said they get lots of ice, which is true. They get lots of ice. There's a reason they get lots of ice, because the temperature is around freezing, 32 degrees Fahrenheit, 0 degrees Celsius. And when the snow forms and it touches the surface is warm, and the snow melts, and then you get water, a lot of moisture on the roadway. And for those of you who've been here for a while watching my live streams, know that when you have a lot of moisture, because it's snowing and it's melting when it makes contact with the road surface, it melts, and then overnight the temperature drops and it freezes and you get ice on the roadways. And that's why there's a lot more ice as opposed to snow, because it's not cold enough for the snow to accumulate, but it is cold enough to form ice from all the precipitation in the environment. And this is the piece that you need to keep in mind when you have black ice on the roadways and you have ice, is because you have a lot of moisture. It's melting, or the temperature is right around freezing, and then overnight the temperature drops to, say, 30 degrees Fahrenheit, 28 degrees Fahrenheit, and then it warms up in the morning. But there's been no traffic on that roadway, and this is the reason that you will find ice in the morning, and you will find these people skidding out and losing control of their vehicle because they didn't take note of the fact that the temperature dropped overnight and there was a lot of precipitation, and there was ice forming. Retired, hello, my friend. Marion, I had to pay my car insurance today. I can say is ouch. Marion, how bad is your car insurance? Is it between 1 and 2,000, or is it between 2 and 3,000? I'm curious. Elevator Fan says they got about an inch of snow there. Snow can happen in November. Evan, snow can happen in October. And if you're in the mountains, funny story about that. When I first moved here almost 20 years ago, which is crazy to think, in British Columbia, we went up in the summertime. We went up to the ski hill, Big White, outside of Kelowna, and I thought, oh, this is really nice. It's rustic, and there's places to live up here, and those types of things. And I thought to myself, this would be a great place to live. And then I learned later, after exploring, living up at the ski hill, that they can get snow anytime after the 25th of August, and the snow doesn't go away until June. So 2 months of summer if you live in the mountains or the ski hills. So if you see these movies where these guys are off gridding and they're growing their own vegetable gardens and those types of things, and they're living in the mountains at high elevations, that's not true. You can't grow a garden. There just isn't a long enough growing season. So know that with snow and those types of things. So here in the mountains, we can get snow anytime after the end of August, depending on the type of winter we're having and those types of things. Marion, $3,000. Yeah, that is crazy expensive. I'm not going to complain about my insurance anymore, fortunately. But it was the same, Marion, talking about expensive insurance and, new drivers paying for insurance and those types of things. when I first moved to British Columbia, the insurance company, even though I was a licensed driving instructor, I'd driven in Australia, I'd driven commercially in Ontario and those types of things, I didn't have any history of driving here in the province of British Columbia. And my insurance was the same as yours, Marion. And, what I ended up doing was the vehicle that I bought, I ended up putting in somebody else's name who I trusted. And then I just put myself on as a secondary driver. That was the way that I could afford my insurance. Otherwise, I couldn't afford it. It was just crazy expensive. Carrie says they got a smallest amount of snow there in Minnesota, but mainly it's been really cold with pretty dry roads. Yeah, same thing here. It's just been around freezing and bleh, bleh. I mean, we did get some sun today, and we got a little bit of sun yesterday, but not for the most part. Retired driving in South is because we don't get snow and lack experience. Yes, that's the other reason definitely is that they don't get snow. They get snow like once a year. And years ago, when I was driving truck, I ended up in North Carolina when they got a dump of snow. And of course, the temperature was around freezing, but it was Friday afternoon. That's when they got the dump of snow. And I showed up to deliver the load, and the place where I showed up to, there wasn't anybody there. They simply went home. Because it's snowing and, the sky is falling. The sky is falling. The sky is falling kind of thing. And that's what they do in the South. They just go home and they stay at home, which is what we should do here on the West Coast, where in Vancouver and on Vancouver Island and Seattle and places like that. They should just go home and stop driving because you really don't need to go to work that badly. And I'll explain more in the presentation why it's so slippery. And it is slippery. And even if you did have winter tires on your vehicle, it's not going to save you. It's not going to save you. It's not going to compensate for how incredibly slippery the roadways are when the temperature is around freezing, around 32 degrees Fahrenheit, around 0 degrees Celsius. Mine is 950 pounds. Unfortunately, that is illegal in the UK, putting someone else as the main driver. How is that illegal, Ant? You can't have somebody who owns the vehicle and then put on somebody else as a secondary driver. You can't do that. I find that hard to believe. Elevator, when it snows, it feels like driving on another planet. Yes, it does. Miles, do you have any advice for the Ohio maneuverability test? My exam is next week, and I'm only at like 75% success rate while practicing right now. Miles, yes, definitely. Stay close to the driver's side, okay? The passenger side will look after itself, so stay tight on this side to the pylons and the cones, okay? And you need to do a lot of looking around, and as well, the other thing that's going to make it easier is you're going to need to figure out how to use your mirrors, because your mirrors will definitely help you with the Ohio maneuverability test and being successful on that. Corey will put up the video for you on the Ohio maneuverability test and have a look at that, and that will definitely give you more details on being successful with the Ohio maneuverability test. But like I said, stay tight to the driver's side, and that will help you out. Now, the other thing, we're talking about insurance. We kind of got stuck on insurance here, but perhaps I can do a live stream on insurance, because there are some ways that you can reduce the cost of insurance. Now, Marion, question for you. The insurance that you have on your car, do you have collision insurance on your car? So the types of insurance are PL and PD, which is public liability, property damage. Those are basic coverage that everybody must carry on their vehicle. So public liability is if you run into somebody and they end up in the hospital and they sue you for $1 million, you have to have public liability insurance, which will pay for that. Property damage, the replacement of their car, the fixing of their house, if you run into somebody's house, or, fixing electricity poles and those types of things. So PL and PD is basic, okay? And then you have fire and theft. If your car catches on fire or somebody steals your car, that's relatively inexpensive in my experience. It's usually like $30 or $40 a year. And then you have what's called collision insurance. And collision insurance is if you do damage to your own vehicle. For example, Tracy in her Audi a few months back here, actually maybe closer to a year. No, it was in the summertime. And her Audi is lowered, so it's about 3 inches lower, and she went into a parking lot and she went over the curb stop. the wrought iron that they used to pound into the holes to hold it in place was sticking up. She drove over the wrought iron. The wrought iron caught onto the radiator and the cowling on the front of the car, and she didn't do the damage when she drove on, but she put it into reverse and backed up, and that's when she did the damage. Now, because she had collision insurance on her Audi, the insurance company paid for to have the vehicle fixed. Now, saying that, once you put collision insurance on your vehicle, your insurance doubles. And so, for example, I only have PL and PD and fire and theft on the buggy, which runs me about $600 a year. Now, if I was going to put collision on the buggy to have it fixed in the event that I did something goofy to it, that my insurance would go up to $1,500. It would double in price. As soon as you put collision insurance on your vehicle, it's going to double in price. It's a risk management thing. It's how much risk you can tolerate, right? I can tolerate the risk because I know that if I put collision insurance on the buggy and I wrote it off, they're only going to give me $2,000 or $3,000 for it. It's not worth me putting collision insurance on it for the $1,200 a year. Within 3 years, I paid for what they're going to give me, right? Now, if you have a newer vehicle, and I know that Marion has a 2017 CRV, which is probably worth $15,000 or $18,000, if she does something where she clips a utility pole or hits somebody else or those types of things, the insurance company is going to fix it, depending on the amount of damage. And oftentimes they'll just write it off, right? So that's the other piece that you need to keep in mind. And so long as you do not buy a car where you have to take out a loan and you have a loan on it, yes, Marion, that's why. Okay, that's why your insurance is $3,000. Because you have collision and comprehensive on that. 50 to 60% of that premium is your collision and comprehensive insurance. So what I was saying was, if you buy a car and you have a car loan, you have to have collision and comprehensive on it. It is a requirement of the loan that the bank is giving you the money because they want to protect their investment. So therefore, as a requirement, you have to have collision and comprehensive on your vehicle. So there's a little bit about insurance and how you can reduce the cost of insurance. Reducing the cost of insurance, buy a vehicle, a secondhand vehicle that you don't have to put collision and comprehensive on it. And that way it's going to save you some money on your insurance. Status, it's Paul. Drove with full force precaution after the snow and it never felt a slip. Awesome. Yes. And, in this day and age, driving in the snow, driving on ice, as long as you go the, traffic flow, the speed that everybody else is going, you're going to be just fine, right? Tires are good. Vehicles, rarely are they rear-wheel drive. Most of them in this day and age are going to be front-wheel drive. They're going to be all-wheel drive, or they're going to be four-wheel drive. So you're going to have traction. Where people get into trouble, and we talked about this last week, curves, corners, and turns. You're simply going too fast for the conditions of the roadway, and you go around the corner, and the vehicle oversteers or it understeers. Oftentimes it oversteers, which means the back end's coming around, and we'll talk more about that in the presentation, but you're going to get into trouble. So know that when you're driving. Excellent. Okay, Evan, we talked about that. Excellent. Yeah, so if you have comprehensive and collision insurance on your vehicle, that's going to double the cost of the insurance on your vehicle. So know that. So as I said, it's a risk factor thing. How much risk can I comfortably tolerate when I'm owning my vehicle? Status, that was after January 3rd, crashed my car into a tree in Whitby. Oh, that's not good. Did you write it off, Status, or were you okay? Hopefully you were okay, just property damage. So yes. All right, so let's get over to the presentation here. We'll get through the presentation. It'll be 10 or 12 minutes. We'll come back. We'll answer any questions about passing a driver's test, being a safer, smarter driver, driving better on snow and ice, not being absolutely terrified, and or starting a career as a truck or bus driver. Marion, so what does comprehension do? So do I don't need it anymore? No, Marion, collision and comprehensive insurance it's it's comprehensive means it's a comprehensive package, which means that you have everything. You have public property damage, public liability, fire and theft, and you have collision insurance. If you do something to your car, if you rear end somebody, or you run into a telephone pole, or you get hung up on something, or drive into a ditch and you do damage to your vehicle, they will fix your vehicle. That's what you're paying for in terms of comprehensive and collision insurance, okay? We leased the car, and so we got comprehensive, but now it's being paid off, so I don't need that anymore. Marion, it's a personal choice about comprehensive insurance. If you can tolerate that risk and you can put some money away, just know that in the event that you end up in the ditch, or you hit a utility pole or some other fixed object or something like that, then you're going to have to foot the bill on getting your vehicle fixed. It's up to you. You're going to have to decide whether you can take on that risk, or whether you're going to sleep better at night paying the $1,500 and knowing that if you run into something, that the insurance company is going to pick up the tab on it, right? Tracy, as I said, she ran over the curb stop. She backed up. She did the damage when she backed up. $15,000 to repair her Audi. New radiator, new transmission cooler, cowling on the front, paint, and those types of things. So it was expensive, okay, when she did that, but the insurance company paid for it because she has comprehensive and collision insurance on her vehicle. So you need to decide what are you able to tolerate in terms of risk, right? Are you going to be able to foot that bill if something happens to your car? Okay, that's the kicker, right? It's like everything else in life, that they have downloaded choice and risk onto the person at the bottom of the rung, right? It's the same thing when you go to the dentist. Oh, you should do this and you should do that and you should do this and that, and it's right. And how much is all those accessories going to cost me, right? That's what you need to decide in terms of getting insurance. All right, so let's get on to the presentation here. We're talking about winter driving in the South, and I want to have you look at this picture here. Winter driving in the South. Why is it more treacherous? Why is it more dangerous driving in the South? Because it definitely is. And it's the same thing with getting Vancouver, British Columbia. They get snow there. It is dangerous. It is treacherous. And, last year they got snow, and the transit companies, the unions, are advocating the government and the municipal government to put winter tires on the transit buses. Well, that's ludicrous, because winter tires do not help you in this kind of snow and ice. They're pointless. They will not improve traction. The only thing that will improve traction in this kind of weather is steel-studded tires or chains. That's the only thing. Snow tires in and of themselves will not do that. So know that when you're driving on these icy conditions, it is just so slippery that it negates any benefit that winter tires will provide. Now, see this image here with the long line of cars driving on the snow and ice? When I say go and drive to the conditions on the roadway, drive as fast as the flow of traffic is going. If you are driving faster than the flow of traffic when it is slippery, when there is icy conditions, you are driving too fast. That is the first piece of critical information that you need to know. It is most treacherous driving on snow and ice when the temperature is near freezing. It is significantly more dangerous than when it is minus 20 degrees Celsius, when it is 15 degrees Fahrenheit. Because when you take ice cubes out of the freezer, when you first take them out for the first minute, they're really sticky because they're super cold. But you leave them on the counter for a couple of minutes and they melt, and there's a layer of water that forms on the outside of the ice cube, and then it goes zinging across the kitchen because the ice is now lubricated by water. And this is the main point, the main reason why it is so dangerous in the South, in Arkansas and Kentucky and Texas, North Texas, when they get snow in the wintertime, because the temperature is around freezing. It's cold enough that there will snow, but when the snow makes contact with the ground is warm and the snow melts and it becomes water, and then overnight you get freezing and the next morning you get ice, and that is why it is treacherous. And this is the main point that you need to keep in mind. As well, as smart drivers have said, Drivers lack the experience. It doesn't matter. You can come from Minnesota and go to Tennessee and get snow, and you even as a veteran winter driver will have difficulty driving on this snow and ice. And when I went to Vancouver Island and the first time they got snow there, I was like, wow, is this something crazy? Because that snow is like grease. It is so slippery to drive on. And think of it another way. Think of ice hockey rinks after the Zamboni goes over and floods the ice. There's a layer of water on top of the ice, and that is when the ice is most slippery. That is when the ice hockey skaters love going out on the ice. And I've never mentioned this, but for years and years while I was going to university, I drove Zamboni for the City of London and for the University of Western Ontario one summer when I worked there because they had summer ice. And when we had hockey games at night, there was a kid that came in and pegged the nets. There's a hole in the ice, and they put a rubber tube in there, and then they put the hockey net on it. And anyway, so I started flooding the ice, and he's coming down. He did the one net at the one end, and he's coming down to do the other net at the other end. And he's got one foot on the patch of ice that hasn't been cleaned yet, and he's sliding along on the water where I soaked it. And of course, he lost his footing, and his feet went up in the air, and he fell down. He came right down on the water on the ice rink that I had just flooded. And he was not only cold, but he was wet too. And so it was just how slippery it is. And it's the same thing when you're driving in these southern states and it is cold and they have ice. It is incredibly slippery. Now, know that the places that you're going to experience the most loss of traction is at intersections. So it becomes incredibly important as you're approaching the intersection, slow down back from the intersection and then creep up to the intersection so you can actually get stopped where you want to get stopped. Ice. Where is ice going to form? Bridges and overpasses are going to freeze first. And the reason that bridges and overpasses freeze first is because they freeze on the top and they freeze on the bottom. So they get cold air on both the bottom and the top. Low and high elevations, any place that the ground dips, you're going to get ice in that dip, and high elevations as we do here in the mountains. And as I was saying last week when I was talking about winter driving, temperatures are not homogeneous, okay? The temperature is going to fluctuate depending on where you are in the geography in and around where you live. So you go down into a dip or a low area and it's going to be colder down there. And as well, if you get a bit of fog, we're talking about, winter fog, precipitation and whatnot is going to lay down in that hollow. Roads that lie in shadow next to buildings, overpasses underneath the overpass is going to be slippery. Buildings, those types of things, and then roads that pass by a body of water. So a lake, a river, those types of things. The wind is going to pick the water up and it's going to drop it on the roadway and then it's going to freeze. And that's where you're going to have ice forming. Okay. No traffic on the roadways overnight. So think of a river. Rivers only freeze in the wintertime where it is still and calm. It does not freeze in the rapids. I mean, unless it gets super duper cold, it's 20 degrees Fahrenheit for weeks and weeks on end, which is minus 20 degrees Celsius. But we haven't seen that in a very long time in terms of, super cold for weeks and weeks on end. So rapids will not freeze. And that principle, you can take that from rivers and look at it on roadways. If you get roadways that have very little traffic, they freeze overnight, there's a lot of precipitation, and then you start driving on them in the morning, that's when they're going to be slippery. Okay, and as well, maintenance crews are going to salt and sand the main roadways first. They're going to leave the back roadways and the rural highways. They're not going to get to those till they're much later. In keeping with that, these southern states do not have road maintenance equipment. They don't have sand trucks. They don't have, plows and those types of things. So they have to make do with what they have. Same thing with where I live here in Vernon. Some years ago, we got 3 feet of snow, 1 meter of snow in a 36-hour period. So in a very short period of time, we got a great deal of snow in a very short period of time. And it's the same thing. We simply do not have the snow removal equipment that we once had decades ago. And so now we're using little skid steers, we're using ATVs with little plows on the front of them, and you know, they're good for a skiff of snow, maybe 2 or 3 inches, but once you start getting into feet and feet of snow, this equipment, these machines, they don't move the snow anymore. And a perfect example of that is down at the dog park where I take the dog every day. The parking lot is a gravel parking lot, and they needed to come in with a piece of equipment and grade the parking lot to get rid of the potholes and whatnot. No, what they bring in is this little tiny excavator with a little scraper on the front of it, and they move the potholes around. So the right equipment for the right job. The South and other places that don't normally experience winter do not have the right equipment to remove snow from the streets and to salt and sand to eliminate the ice on the roadways, especially the farther you get off the main roads, because the equipment that they do have is being allocated to those main roads. Intersections are slippery, curves, corners, and turns. Anytime that you're going to go around a curve, you're going to turn the vehicle. Make sure that you are slowed down and that you have power to the wheels and are not braking. And if you do start to lose control, get your foot off the brake. The brake is not your friend. Intersections are going to be especially slippery because the cars are coming up, they're braking, the tires are locking up, there's friction, and from the friction is heat, and they're going to melt the snow and ice a little bit, and that snow and ice is going to be lubricated by the subsequent water at the intersections. And as I just mentioned, main roads are cleared first, so the highways and whatnot are going to be, you know, the equipment is going to be allocated to them. But suburban areas, rural highways, roadways and whatnot that are off kind of the main tracks are going to be left. And that's what happened here in Vernon, as I said, with a few years ago when we got that huge dump of snow. Actually, most of the streets, the suburban streets and whatnot, didn't get cleared at all. We had banks and banks of snow until spring. They just let it melt because they didn't have the equipment to do anything with it. It's not like, you know, Ottawa, Ontario, Canada, or Montreal, or these other places that get snow and have huge accumulations of snow in the wintertime. And they have enormous machines with snow blowers on them and large dump trucks and those types of things, and they just clear the snowbanks and keep city streets clear. We don't have those kinds of equipment, and especially in the South, they do not have that equipment to do the road maintenance that they need to. Slow down before curves, corners, and turns, and power through the curve. And when I say power through, I don't mean accelerating and, you know, like a race car driver shooting out of the curve on the other side. But you do want the wheels turning with a bit of power to them so that you're pushing the vehicle around the vehicle and you're opposing the forces of inertia and the centrifugal force that continues to want the vehicle to go straight, because it takes force to get the vehicle around the corner, and as well you need traction, but you're going to have to go slow enough to get that traction. And have a look. Corey will put up the video for you I put up last week about driving mistakes, where this was exactly when they were getting the winter storms in the South and they were losing control on curves, corners, and turns because they weren't powering the unit through, and oftentimes they took their foot off the accelerator or they hit the brake and then subsequently lost control on slippery conditions. Oversteering. Oversteering is when the back end, the ass end of the vehicle starts coming around. Oftentimes what happens is you're driving too fast for conditions and the vehicle breaks traction and the back end of the vehicle comes around. And as they say, this oftentimes scares the passenger. Not so much the driver, but it does scare the passenger for sure. Understeering is when you turn the steering wheels and the vehicle continues to go straight. And this is the piece that scares the driver, is that when you turn the steering wheel and it just continues to go straight. So braking and steering are two separate actions in the wintertime, and when you're driving on slippery conditions, especially in the South, when you're driving on slippery ice that has a layer of water on top of it and it is lubricated, because in order for you to get any amount of traction, you have to let the wheels turn. And when you're braking, you brake in a straight line, get your speed down, and then once you get the vehicle under control, then you go around the corner and turn. Those two things have to be separate actions when you're driving on snow and ice in the winter time. Skid recovery, steer in the direction that you want to go. And I know that there are old people out there, and I'm going to say old people because it's left over from the 1950s and the 1960s. When your car goes in a skid, turn in the direction of the skid. What does that even mean? Because I'll put this question up on the community tab, and inevitably people will say, no, you're wrong. You don't steer in the direction you want to go. You steer in the direction of the skid. And it always makes me laugh because it's like, how do you know which way the skid is going? And actually, Corey might be able to find it there. There's a Bill Cosby skit from the 1950s, and he loses control of his Volkswagen Beetle, and he's going down the road sideways, and he's trying to remember in his head, and he's going through in slow motion, and he's trying to remember which direction the skid is going. So let's just make it really simple. If you start to lose control of your vehicle, just go in the direction that you want to go. You know, steer the vehicle in the direction that you want it to go, okay? Sometimes if you lose traction, you break traction and your vehicle starts to go out of line, what is called yaw, when it starts to move out of that straight line axis, head to the shoulder of the road, get into the gravel or get onto the grass or whatnot. And Big Mac Sam, I actually did look up the woman who jumped out of her car when she was losing control of her vehicle last week, and it was the one comment was exactly what I said, was thinking the same thing. As soon as she jumped out of her car, the vehicle drove onto the grass. Well, she would have got traction on the grass and been able to get control of her vehicle, but I don't know. Maybe she just felt, oh, I'm only doing 20 miles an hour. You know, I'll just jump out and let it go. But, so, you know, those are the types of things that are going on in the wintertime. So again, get out of the main tracks, get over to the shoulder of the road, and don't give up. And make sure that you're wearing your seatbelt as well, because not only will your seatbelt protect you in the event of a crash, your seatbelt will also keep you in the seat. You won't get thrown into one of the footwells, because it's really tough to drive the car when you're laying on your back in the footwell on the passenger side of the car, right? So this is the other reason that you're going to be wearing your seatbelt in the wintertime, is to maintain control of your vehicle. Okay, backups. We know in the wintertime that sometimes the traffic is going to back up and do all kinds of crazy things, and you don't want to get rear-ended. You don't want to end up in the pileup that could potentially happen on interstates and freeways. So you are looking down the roadway, you are observing, you see that the traffic is stopped forward. Okay, so half a mile back, a quarter of a mile back, start slowing down. Okay, get your four-way flashers on to indicate to traffic behind you that you are going slow, that something unpredictable is happening. Because if you've got space in front of your vehicle and you're still moving forward, that is the defensive driving posturing that you put in place to prevent yourself getting rear-ended and getting stuck into this big, massive pileup on the highway, on the interstate. All right. So, and stay off the brakes. All right. The brakes are not your friend in the wintertime on slippery and icy conditions. They are going to get you into trouble. And again, just to reiterate this, because there has been some misunderstanding, there has been confusion about ABS brakes. ABS brakes only work in emergency braking situations. They do not work all the time. Okay? Most of the time, your brakes are just normal brakes. They just do what they're supposed to do most of the time. It's when you get into emergency braking situations that your ABS will kick in. Now, what happens on slippery conditions is you'll be pushing down on the brake pedal and you're not stopping because you're sliding. And then we keep pushing down on the brake pedal until it gets to the bottom. And when you get to the bottom of the brake pedal, that's when the ABS brakes kick in. And they're not going to help you out on slippery conditions. Believe me, I told the story about being in Ottawa and coming up to an intersection and trying to get stopped. And the ABS is kicking in. It's and the next thing you know, you're in the middle of the intersection because it just will not stop the vehicle. So know that about ABS brakes. All right, crashing. If you are unfortunate to be involved in a crash or a crash is imminent, okay, try to reduce your speed as much as possible. Try to slow down as much as you can. Aim for something soft, a hedge, a fence, shrubbery, those types of things. Don't aim for a tree. Don't aim for a rock. Don't aim for an oncoming vehicle, okay? Because those things are not going to move, right? That's going to incur the most amount of damage and potentially injure yourself when you're driving. Same thing, I was looking at a transit bus crash in Calgary a few years ago, and the defense counsel said that it was the only option the bus driver had was to rear end the car in front of him. And I looked at the video footage and I was like, actually the bus driver could have driven up on the sidewalk because there was nobody on the sidewalk, and or could have driven into the left lane because there was nobody beside the bus and could have simply driven around the car. But the first mistake that the driver made, and this is the biggest defensive technique that you could put in place, is having a 5 to 6 second following distance from the vehicle in front of you. Therefore, if the vehicle in front of you does something goofy, you've got time to stop. And years ago, when I was driving garbage trucks out of Toronto into Michigan, freezing rain coming back from Michigan and empty in the truck. I mean, even though, the truck weighed 55,000 pounds empty, it was still incredibly heavy. Just to give you some perspective on that, the average car weighs 2,500 pounds. So that gives you some idea how heavy the truck was. But anyway, keeping the 5 to 6 second following distance behind a minivan on a 2-lane highway, the driver of the minivan spun out in front of me and was facing me when I got the truck stopped, a couple of truck lengths back from the car. But that's what I was able to do because I had that defensive posturing in place of that good following distance in front. Okay, so proactive winter driving, you do not want to end up in this mess of the pileup on the interstate. So take note of driving conditions. The other piece about driving in the south in places where they don't get snow, where they don't get ice, if you do get snow or ice and it's snowing out and you need to go out and drive, get someplace where there isn't any traffic behind you and that there's nobody around you, and just test the conditions. Put your foot on the brake, pump the brake a couple of times and see whether it's slippery, see whether you have traction or not. Figure out what the conditions are that you're on. Don't get out on the roadway and start giving her and then figure out, oh, wait, it's really slippery. Just know that and keep yourself safe. Actually test the conditions on the roadway. Angelo, hello, my friend. Just stopping by to wish you a good night. I'm going to sleep so I can work tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll watch the live calmly. God bless you. Hugs from the best in Brazil. Thank you so much, my friend. Have a great night. All the best. Michael, Happy New Year, boss. Thanks very much for your lectures and updates. You are most welcome, my friend. And Sam is watching on his Roku TV. That is excellent. Yes, lots of good stuff on Roku TV there, Sam. Sam, do you have any snow in New York City? I saw something about upstate New York on Twitter. I don't take that as being reliable, but got a tremendous dump of snow, like 4 feet of snow. Somebody was shuffling out in a driveway or something, but I don't know. Maybe that was it. Corey, I think I found the skits, $75 car, Bill Cosby. Yeah, that might be it, Corey. Definitely, he was talking about that and, driving a standard transmission on a hill and whatnot. But yeah, it's a pretty funny skit when he's talking about it, when you go into a skid, turn in the direction of the skid, and he's trying to figure out what that means. And then he wraps his car around a tree. So he never really figured out which direction was the skid. And so this is why we just simplify it and we say, just steer in the direction you want to go, right? Just steer where you want to go, because people will say that to me. And my response to them is, well, if your car is skidding and the skid is going in the direction of a ditch, do I really want to turn in the direction of the skid? No, I don't want to turn in the direction of the skid because I don't want to go in the ditch. I want to continue to go down the roadway. Okay, so keep that in mind when you're driving on ice and snow. And as I said in the introduction, the reason that I did this post on driving in ice and snow in the wintertime in the South is due to a poll on LinkedIn. And you get an expertise in a topic matter and you start talking about it and lecturing about it and those types of things, and you don't kind of realize, and Sam can identify with this as well, is you don't realize kind of how much information and knowledge you actually have. And I was looking at the post and I was thinking to myself, they missed the very reason why it's so treacherous to drive in the South is because the temperature's around freezing. and the ice is lubricated, and they don't have experience with that kind of thing. And even myself, having years and years of experience of driving in the wintertime, when they got snow on Vancouver Island, where they don't get snow, and I was out driving around, and I was like, this is just greasy slop, and nobody should be out driving in this, because this is crazy, treacherous, dangerous. It's the same thing with when you see those crazy videos of the hill video and it's sheer ice and the car is just like sliding down sideways because the driver's holding the brake. Just think of that as like everywhere, because when you get snow and ice in Louisville, Kentucky, in Wichita, Kansas, in Dallas, Texas, that's what it's like. It's just this grease on the roadways and everything is ice. And as I said, we should just adopt a mentality where we just go home. Because, you know, the bus union, the transit union in Vancouver, for example, can advocate to put winter tires on the buses all day long, but it's not going to do anything. Nothing. It's not going to do anything, because this kind of weather condition, this kind of winter, when it is that slippery at freezing, winter tires, it completely negates any benefit of having winter tires on your vehicle. As I said, the only thing that is going to help a vehicle in that kind of weather is steel-studded tires or chains on the vehicle. And we've had that kind of weather here too, where it's around freezing. We get a dump of snow, it freezes overnight. We get ice in the morning because a lot of the snow has melted over the daytime and it becomes water. And, you know, we get a lot of trucks that can't get up the hills here and those types of things because, well, whether they have chains, again, coming back to the equipment requirements for clearing ice and snow and doing the maintenance, the winter maintenance on the roadways, you know, even if they have chains, a lot of times the drivers simply won't put them on their vehicle. So that's the other thing that happens. Retired. Rick, is it appropriate to use the traction control on my Mazda CX-5? Yes, absolutely use the traction control, because retired, the thing that the traction control does is it simply, if it detects wheel spin, it's going to direct power to the other side and put traction where it's needed. The other thing about traction control is it also helps on curves, corners, and turns, because what happens is when you go around a curve, right, the tires on the outside are turning faster than the inside wheels, and the inside wheels aren't going very fast, right? These wheels have to slow down. So say you're going left. Yeah, that's left. Yes, that's left. My left, your right. If you're going this way, these tires are turning slower than these tires. So what happens with the traction control, the stability control, is it will speed these wheels up and put power to them and help you to get around the corner. So the traction control is going to help you. Now, the only time that the traction control is not going to help you is if you are in deep snow. Because what's happening in deep snow is that it's going to reduce power to the wheels, and sometimes in deep snow you kind of have to back up. You have to get the wheel spinning, take a run at it, and then back up again, and then you need to take a run at it again. So you have to turn the traction control off. But other than that, most of the time you want to have the traction control activated on your vehicle. Corey says traction control is great. Yes, it is. It is a great advantage, and it has saved and helped a lot of people. Same thing with ABS brakes. It has saved a lot of people on the roadways, and especially on motorcycles. I mean, the ABS brakes has been proven one of the most technological advances in motorcycle safety in a very long time, you know, next to tires, of course. But it really keeps people safe, motorcycle riders safer for sure. And it's the same thing with traction control. It keeps people safe. And, you know, Tracy's Audi has the traction control, the Audi traction control system. I haven't drawn a blank on what it is right now, but just crazy, you know, what that traction control will do in terms of that vehicle and being able to go around in corners and those types of things. Carrie, driving on super slick roads is definitely white knuckle driving. Yes, it is, Carrie. Absolutely. I mean, even for me, as I said to you, you know, when we got the one dump of snow in all the years that I lived on Vancouver Island, where they do not get snow, but they do get that one dump of snow, it's grease. it is just grease. And it's the same thing as Vancouver, the city of Vancouver. It's the same thing if they get snow in Seattle. It is just grease, and there isn't anything you can do about it. And as far as I'm concerned, they should just shut it down. It's a day of emergency. It's a state of emergency, and people should be. There should be a curfew about when people should just go home. It's just go home and stay off the roadways, because it is not safe. We do not have the equipment to clean the roadways and do winter maintenance. So therefore, it is not safe for people to be on the roadways, and they shouldn't be on the roadways. All right. Traction control is great. Awesome. Excellent. All right. Sam says it's boring over here. Nothing crazy or thrilling at all. Just saying. Sam, it sounds exactly like what it's like here in the interior of British Columbia right now. It's just boring. There's no snow. There's no winter. It's just bleh, bleh, which has been a little bit punctuated by some partly blue skies the last couple of days. Now, on the other hand, my mom lives in southwestern Ontario, near the Great Lakes, and they're getting the Great Lake effect. And every time I look at the weather app, it is snowing there. And my mom has said that they just have snow up to their eyeballs. They have like 4 or 5 feet of snow where my mom lives in southwestern Ontario, which is just crazy. And, it's like last week, the southern states were all getting snow and ice, and we're getting nothing here. And I mean, even the ski hills are suffering a little bit out here in the west. We're going to Mount Baker next week skiing, and they have a good snow base, but it's right around freezing. It's every time I look at the snow report, it's 32 degrees Fahrenheit. So it'll be interesting. I'll shoot some video going up to the ski hill and those types of things, and we'll have a look and whatnot. So yeah. Blah for sure. And it just, it's everything's gray and no leaves on the trees, and it's just, yeah. And, I was editing some video today from the summertime when I drove from Washington State across to Ohio, and I was just like, oh my God, look at the bright blue sky and the nice trees, and everything is just so awesome. Whereas now it's January and it's blah, and it's after Christmas, and we're all getting our credit card bills, and we're just like, oh my God, I got to make some money, and I got to go to work, and it's dry January, we can't drink. So, it's just all kind of crazy in terms of wintertime and driving and those types of things. It's actually funny because the other day it actually warmed up to like 40 degrees Fahrenheit here, which is like 4 or 5 degrees Celsius. And it was warm enough on Saturday, I had driven down to Vancouver Island with the buggy, and it was just like filthy dirty. And I actually went out and washed it. And now I'm driving around town because now it got cold again. And the buggy is like super clean. I'm sure everybody's like, how did he get his car so clean? Which is weird. So, Carrie, I bet there are more accidents when the road conditions are super slick, greasy, icy, and snowy roads. And actually, Carrie, that's an interesting point that you raised that point. There aren't. The most number of crashes during the year are June, July, and August. More crashes happen in June, July, and August than the rest of the year combined. So know that it is not the winter time when the most number of crashes happen. It is the summer months when the most number of crashes happen. And the interesting point about that, if you're looking at it kind of from an academic point of view, Australia rarely has winter time. I mean, they do have some snow hills and those types of things, but they have one of the most rigorous traffic safety programs of any country in the world. And the TAC, the Traffic Association, I can't remember the acronym now, but they just have these really vivid, gory public safety commercials that they show on television. But nobody ever points at Australia and says, look at Australia, how they have reduced number of traffic crashes and the number of traffic accidents and injuries and maimings in the world. Because they almost always have summertime and people drive dangerously as well. The roads are narrower in Australia. If you've ever been to Australia, they are much narrower. So, and it's the same thing with the United States of America and whatnot. And this is why I preach defensive driving, and the people that are here, the smarter drivers that are listening on the live stream every week, What's happening is in the United States of America, you want to talk about car crashes, in the United States of America, every 12 to 18 months, more people die on American roads than all the soldiers sent to the Vietnam War between 1963 and 1975. So what's that? 12 years? More people are killed in car crashes every 12 to 18 months in the United States of America than all the American soldiers sent to Vietnam during that war, that conflict in Southeast Asia. That gives you some perspective on how enormous this issue is. And we have all the traffic safety experts and the urban planners and those types of things going on about, car brain, and we hate cars right now, and putting in bike paths and those types of things. And basically they're just usurping space from cars. And what's going to happen is that we are going back to what we had in terms of a melee, which is just a crazy mix of traffic that we had at the beginning of the 19th century, when we had horses and cars and trucks and trolleys and trams and buses and semi-trucks. We're going to get back to that, because this is what they're going to do with cities. Because one of the things that they don't realize in terms of traffic on our roadways in North America is that they keep replicating what is going on in Europe and what is going on in Southeast Asia. And it works in high density cities. It works when you have 2,000 people per square mile living there. It doesn't work when you have 3 people per square mile, because people don't cycle in North America. And they will argue till they are blue in the face that people do in fact cycle. But here where I live, we're putting in bike paths. I bet you less than 1% of 1% of the population actually cycles here, because we have hills. As soon as you have hills, people don't cycle. What you do have are electric scooters and electric bicycles, and now that opens a whole new can of worms, because some of these electric scooters I know are doing 30, 40 miles an hour. And what are we going to do with that? And anyway, I digress. But going back to the point that Carrie made, no, the most number of crashes do not happen in the wintertime. They happen in the summertime. Epic in the southern states, they are not used to winter conditions as seen in the northeast metropolis and New England. Importantly, pay attention to state and provincial announcements for speeds. Yes, you're exactly right. They're not used to it. But not only are they not used to it, the conditions are different. The weather is different, that it is super slippery, and that even if you do have driving experience, winter driving experience, if you get into those conditions, you're not going to be expecting what you're going to encounter. It was the same thing when I encountered snow on Vancouver Island, and it was crazy, stupid, slippery. It's just grease. It's just grease, because even if it's snow and you get a 3 or 4 centimeter accumulation of snow where you get 2 or 3 inches, it packs down. The cars drive over it, compact it, and then there's water on top of it, and the water lubricates the snow and ice, and that's what makes it super slippery. So even if you have winter tires, even if you have driving experience, you're still going to be caught out by how incredibly slippery this is. And this is what I was saying earlier about the transit company in Vancouver saying, oh, we're going to put winter tires on our buses. It's not going to do anything. You might as well take the money and put it in a pile and burn it for the amount of good it's going to do. You're wasting time, you're wasting your money, because the weather conditions negate any benefit of those winter tires. Winter tires work best when it is super cold, when it's like 15 degrees Fahrenheit or it's like, minus 10 degrees Celsius. That's when winter tires really show their benefits. Sam, also longer days in the summer. The extended daylight can result in more time spent driving, increasing exposure to potential crashes. Yes, as well, Sam, the other thing going on with longer hours in the summertime, you have more people out on the summertime because they feel safe. They want to be outside. I know I want to be outside in the summertime. So there's more people driving. There's also a bigger mix of traffic on the roadways in the summertime. You have more pedestrians, motorcycle riders, pickup trucks pulling caravans, kids on their skateboards, their electric scooters, their electric bicycles. I mean, right now, and this is the other reason that I advocate not postponing your driver's test until the spring is because there's less traffic on the roadways right now. We don't have the bicycles. We don't have the motorcycle riders. We don't have the pickup trucks pulling the caravans, right? So there's less traffic on the roadways. This is the other reason that you need to be taking your driver's test in the wintertime. Marion, those electric scooters and bikes are dangerous because they don't always see or hear them coming. Yes, absolutely. Not to mention that you can't determine, in fact, how fast they're traveling, because those black scooters, the privately owned ones, the ones that aren't rentals, we have the whole rental company here in town with the orange scooters. I mean, those things are, like riding a turtle, but you get the ones where they buy them themselves with the $4,000. Some of those things are doing 30, 40 miles an hour. They're doing 50, 60 kilometers an hour. They are just really cooking up and down the sidewalks and in the bike paths and those types of things. Sam, lots more activity in the summertime. Yes, and as well, as you know, Sam, you're also getting the rebound effect, right? Because people drive safer cars, newer cars, ABS brakes, stability, traction control, airbags, seat belts, those types of things, and they drive more aggressively. They follow too close. As you said, Sam, and I learned this fact from you, the number one crash in North America is rear end crashes because people are following too close because they feel safe. Oh, I can get stopped in time, so then we have more crashes in the summertime than we do in the wintertime. In the wintertime, there's actually some risk. People actually take on and feel some risk, whereas in the summertime they have the optimism bias. Oh, the roads are clear, it's sunny out, I can see 47 miles down the roadway, I'm going to speed and I'm going to drive aggressively. So yeah, this is why we have more crashes, more injuries, more traffic deaths in the summertime than we do in the wintertime. And the other thing I used to say about when I was driving truck and whatnot, the goofy people knew to stay home in the wintertime, and that's why I always enjoyed driving in the wintertime as well. And, coming back to traction control, coming back to winter tires and equipment, years ago when I was working at the truck driving school, when we got that 3 feet of snow in 36 hours, I was actually out working with a student, and we came back to the yard where we parked the truck, and you pulled in front of the building, and then you had to go across the road into an alley, and then you had to straight back up into the yard where we parked the trucks. And so we pulled in the front of the building, and I said to the student, you're going to have to get out, and you're going to have to put a chain on. And of course, the student grumbled, I don't want to do that. I said, well, you either do that, or we can't pull into the alley on the other side because we're going to get stuck. So the student gets out, begrudgingly puts a chain on. We just needed one chain. Puts a chain on the truck. We pull across without incident. We back up into the yard and park the truck. The other driving instructor, who was not very smart, comes in front, pulls across the road into the deep snow in the alley on the other side of the roadway. He's got the trailer hanging across the roadway and holding up traffic. Doesn't put a chain on the truck and gets stuck. And not only did he get stuck, instead of, waiting for me to go get the other truck and then hook a chain on and pull him out, he starts to rock the truck back and forth, and he's gearing up. And at one point, I think he was in like 5th gear with the tires spinning at just a crazy amount of speed. And it took him like 10 minutes. I mean, he finally got it out, but it was just the most unprofessional show of a driving instructor I think I had ever seen. And I've seen some crazy thing with truck drivers and driving instructors over the years. And I just walked away shaking my head going, this guy is just a complete moron, because all he had to do was put a chain on the truck and everything would have been fine. But that's what happens in snow and ice. People think they know and they don't know. Epic in some places that are year-round hot, like Southern California, Miami, Florida. Watch out for motorcycles because they will be used year-round to take extra precautions if you're going to those places. Yes, you're absolutely right, Epic. And the other piece about that, if you go to California, lane splitting is legal in the state of California. So they will be lane splitting in California, which means that you're stopped at the traffic light, the motorcycles will come up between the lanes of traffic. Now, there are people and I can think of a police officer that is on Twitter who are against lane splitting and will always show you the big Harley dressed out with the bags, saddle bags and the windshields and the cowlings and all those types of things on it, trying to get up between cars and bangs into the cars. Those aren't the kind of cars that we're talking, or the kind of motorcycles and scooters that are going up between lines of cars. And if you go to Europe, they're going to lane split as well. So know that is going to happen if you go to those places. But yes, and I am a huge advocate of lane splitting. I think that it actually works. I think that it increases visibility of motorcycles, and I think that it should be legal everywhere. Now, I also believe in helmets. I think that they should wear helmets, but I think that lane splitting should be allowed for sure. And there are some videos here on YouTube and whatnot if you want to look at those. So if you have any questions, hit that thumbs up button. Leave a comment down in the comment section there if you're watching on the replay and have questions about driving in the South and figuring out why it's more treacherous and more dangerous. And even if you do have winter driving experience, you're going to find it very challenging to drive in those winter conditions where ice and snow forms at freezing, because it is much, much more slippery than it is when the temperature is 15 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit, or minus 20 degrees Celsius rather. So know that it is going to be incredibly challenging, and this is why they have so many crashes and people ending up in the ditches when the southern states get snow and ice. So for another video, click here and have a look at that. More information, more details about driving on ice and snow and keeping yourself safe in the wintertime. And remember, pick the best answer, not necessarily the right answer. Have a great night. Bye now.